Hello, everybody. This is Andrew from the Ark of the Covenant, and going to do another video because this topic today, which is neon, it got really big. I did a lot of research and had to revisit a lot of my old chemistry studies. Most of it I remembered correctly, but I did need to brush up on a few points. So, it's good. It's daytime this time. Last one was at night. I was feeling a little bit washed out, but yeah, got a little bit more spring in my step this morning. So anyway, let's go ahead with it. So neon. Um, Thank you, Lukman, for pointing me in that direction, because I had the oxygen and I had the hydrogen, but I didn't have the helium. Sorry, sorry, the neon. I didn't have the noble gas element figured out yet, so it's amazing, and yeah, so glad we started this process, and I hope you guys are learning as much as I am. Okay, so neon. So following on from the idea that the element of neon is representative of the Spirit of God was on the face of the waters, as in the Bible. So this makes a great deal of logical sense when you consider what neon is as an element and how it behaves electromagnetically. Neon is one of 8 noble gases, but we'll just mention the first. Well, let's do 4 so we can have a little bit of fun with it too along the way. So the 4 will look out of the first 4 noble gases, which are helium, neon, argon, as you'll remember maybe from Jason and the Argonauts, and krypton, which you'll probably know from Superman. So how the periodic table of elements functions, this is going to be important to know, just generally in life, but in relation to what we're talking about here. So with the periodic table of elements, each row of entries, okay, across ways, indicates how many of valence electron shell layers are orbiting around the the neutron nucleus. I've written that incorrectly, but there we go. Okay, so 7th row down the table means that there are 7 layers of orbiting electrons shells. Okay, now each of these shell layers has a maximum carrying capacity of electrons. And once that capacity is reached, then another layer is added on. So the first orbital shell of every atom can only hold 2 electrons, but then each subsequent orbital shell thereafter can hold 8 electrons. And it's this principle that explains why noble gases do not engage in chemical reactions. Okay, the noble gases, or each atom of a noble gas, has a different number of orbital shells to another noble gas atom, but every noble gas atom has a full and complete outer shell, right, fully stacked. Now this means that it cannot share electrons to other atoms, and it cannot accept any extra electrons into its outer orbit from other atoms. And this makes each noble atom a self-contained cycle of energy. Right? They are balanced. They don't need any assistance from another atom to get their balanced energy cycle. They just are that in their own right. So helium, the first one, the smallest and the lightest, has 1 shell and it has the 2 electrons in it. Neon has 2 complete orbital shells. Argon has 3, and krypton has 4 orbital shells. So now modern science eventually rediscovered all this, and they rediscovered that if you pass an electrical current through noble gas particles, they will glow very brightly. And it's much the same effect as lightning. When it strikes, it agitates the nitrogen particles in the air, and that creates that whitish blue glow of, well, every electrical arc, including lightning. So when you think of neon lighting, it's probably, you imagine a myriad of different colored lights and many shapes. But the truth about that is that each noble gas glows a different color when it is electrified. So in fact, all of the noble gases are used in different ratios inside neon lighting to create the colors. And then tinted glass would be used for any remaining shades that can't be accounted for by the gas blends. So, neon, well, it glows red. It's a orangey tinted red color. And it's the very brightest luminescence out of all of the gases too, which is unusual because you'd think as maybe the particles got bigger at the argon, krypton, and radon end that they would glow more intensely, but that's not the case. For some reason, I don't know, neon is the one that glows brightest. Now, the first neon light signs, of course, then were only red. And it is only red signs that are actually neon gas signs. All the others are just generally called gas discharge lights. So if you, oh, there we go. So now and knowing this, we can have ourselves a little chuckle about the fact that the almighty Superman crumbled at the presence of a krypton gas particle, which is actually unable to have any effect on anything in the universe except apparently Superman. So perhaps what they were going for with the Superman angle there and the story writing was that this noble gas krypton represented the only omnipotent power, the only godlike power that could stop the unstoppable Superman. Because for the purposes of the story, if Superman were actually endlessly powerful and invincible, well, there wouldn't be much of a story to tell about that. There would be no emotional investment to be made there because we know he would survive regardless. So nothing can be endlessly powerful. Everything needs its arch enemy, its arch nemesis, its yin yang, its positive to negative. Okay, so neon has the narrowest liquid state temperature range out of all of the elements. So this means that neon is never really present on Earth as a liquid. It moves straight from a frozen solid state to a gas in essentially the blink of an eye. We're talking about a temperature of minus 270 degrees Celsius, where it turns from ice into liquid, and then it is liquid for about 2 degrees of temperature range, and then immediately turns into a gas. So anything above like 200 and minus 270 degrees, minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit, anything above that, and it's a gas. Okay, so essentially it's always a gas. Where are we now, guys? Right, the other thing about neon is the abundance of it. It's the fifth most abundant atom in the universe. I do note the number 5 there. Filed and noted. And although it's only a small percentage of the atmosphere on Earth, it's the most abundant noble gas on Earth. But still, it's relatively rare on Earth, but it is found in very large quantities throughout the rest of the universe. Neon is monoatomic. Now that just means it never forms bonds with itself or anything else, which we've mentioned. Now this enables neon gas to actually move into and through and be carried inside of H2O molecules, water particles. So neon gas is quite literally inside of everything. It's around, it's inside, it's above, it's below, it's everywhere. But what it does as a gas is it ascends, it rises, as per helium does. And now helium does it in a very big rush because it's a very lightweight. And that's why it's best to use for balloons. And neon rises, but at a very slow rate compared to helium. And I had this thought and like to offer it that the word helium could quite easily be helium. It's an interesting thing to contemplate. This is why there is very little of either helium or neon on Earth. Right? But there's massive amounts of them out in the cold universe because the gas rises up out of the atmosphere where it freezes then back into solid particles. Neon was detected and has been detected by NASA in the exosphere of the moon. And the exosphere of the moon is like the moon's version of our atmosphere, obviously very brief, but there is a close to the surface area of gas particles that don't constitute outer space. So neon's there, it's up, it's floating around everywhere in the universe. Now when neon is compressed, it forms into what they call a face-centered cube crystal lattice. Okay, it's the only one that forms into a perfectly cubic lattice. The 8 electrons on the outer shell face up on each side. So I've written here 4 in my notes, but I contemplated that it's actually 2 to each side. So the 8 divided by 4 giving 2. So each set of atoms just lines up in a perfect square to the other. Each electron and atoms, but because of the electrons, they line up into a perfectly square lattice. Okay. I believe, I didn't go into it, but I believe there are molecules that have been created or that exist that will form cubic lattices, but neon is the only single atomic particle which can do that. Right, neon gas filled tubes are used also to earth out lightning strikes because the current, huge current, can pass safely through the neon gas quickly and without overheating, essentially letting it slip straight through the cubic gas lattice like an electric freeway, right? There's no intersections. It can just pass straight down the endless tubes in between the cubic lattice. The empty spaces are straight line tunnels. And the energy just slips straight on through there because whilst the neon particles become agitated and vibrate and emit light, protons of light, because of that, they don't care. They're just, whatever, okay. As soon as the current's gone, they just return back to their normal state. Okay, so whilst knowing, right, so neon, we're happy, sorry guys, don't want to miss anything. Yeah, so neon gas is the one that's used to carry an electrical arc, and that in turn creates light. If you've ever done any welding, which I've done a fair bit of, welding steel, that's amazing. You've got an electrical arc at your fingertips melting steel at 2,500 degrees Celsius right at your fingertips there. And you just, when the stick moves too far away from the metal, well, the current can't jump across the gap anymore and the weld stops, and then you put it back closer and the current reopens and the current flows, it buzzes and hisses and bubbles lava, and it's fantastic. It's a really cool thing to do. So, back on topic, I digress. And whilst knowing all of these scientific attributes of neon is going to be important in decoding the symbology and mythology, it's the main attributes which make it the prime candidate for being the representation of the Spirit of God upon the face of the water. If we have a large mass of water, what better way to contain it than by using something that is unable to interact with the hydrogen and the oxygen water? A substance that forms a tight net of small particles compared to big, clumsy water molecules. The H2O is trapped like a big tuna in a fishing net, Maddie, encompassed on all sides by the neon. And when the time comes to energize the water, the best way to safely deliver the current into the water is by conducting it through the neon gas. So considering all of these scientific attributes of neon, it's rather easy to see how a certain number of famous cultures may have come to worship the sun itself as God, but the science doesn't really bear that out as being an accurate representation of God. Sure, the energy from the sun is important. It's critical, in fact, but it is only a piece of the creation ingredients list puzzle. The sun is not omnipotent. It was created and it will be destroyed. It is a constructed unity just like everything else is. Everything that we can see. The sun's cruel and it's merciless. You don't want to spend more than 3 days out in the sun without water or shelter. You won't survive it. Okay, so were they worshipping neon? Well, maybe. Maybe those Egyptian sun discs were awfully orangey red in colour, weren't they? Most of the ones I recall seeing were rusty reddish colour, very orangey red. I've seen a couple of yellows around, but we've got to remember too, with looking at the Egyptian glyphs, that's a 2,500 year, that we confirm and know of, time span, and a lot changed during that 2,500 years. Things were reinvented, reimagined, reassigned. I think cultures worshipped the sun for a period of time, and they worshipped the power of the sun, and they wished to have that power for themselves or for the people to believe that the leaders, the kings, had sun-like powers. But again, the sun is not an endless, omnipotent power, and only an uneducated person would believe that it was. So, and those sun worshipping cultures lived in an extremely uneducated time period. But as I've suggested, I don't believe that we were always. I mean, that was just a period. And prior to that, this language code and these stories are saying that we did at a time in the past understand science in the way that we understand it now. So the red color, we see it passion and love, but also violence and danger. And the red, the blood and the wine, and the red of apples, shiny, tempting apples, and witches' shoes. So is neon God? No. But neon is analogous to the spirit of whatever or whoever God is. Neon is the glowing symbol of what God would be like if God does exist. So God, neon, always rising to be above all other matter. It's always balanced, it's always reliable, it's a neutral arbiter. which can endlessly deliver energy. Whilst it's quite rare here on Earth, the universe all around us is chock-a-block full of the stuff. It encircles us in that way. It is inside of us in that way. It is all around us in that way all of the time. But you cannot see it. You cannot even see the signs of neon's actions, not in the way that you can see the signs of oxygen's hydrogen, right? Oxygen causes oxidization. We know it's there. We can see the visible signs of action, but neon does not cause oxidization. It doesn't cause anything. Okay, it's neutral. Neon sits above all, watching the show, but not getting involved. Just filling all of the empty spaces. So no, by my estimation, and based upon that research and everything we have put together to date, neon is not God. But to an ancient scientist, it was a perfect analogy for the invisible energy which flows in between all things. It was analogous for the vital energy, the EV, the balanced, neutral, vital energy. When we say the Spirit of God, we mean the consciousness of God, not the physical entity. So neon is representative of the spirit side, the air, the etheric. The Spirit of God is like the mind of God, right? The consciousness. It's how we believed that a God of this chaos system would think, and that it doesn't think, right? It just is. God is a neutrality by this theory. Right? It's the combination of both positive and negative. God is a balance, and therefore God has no action to take. God does not interact. His mind is neutral. The Spirit of God is to let it be. It's the neutral net in which all of existence is suspended in, right? The net, the energy balanced beginning. Right? God is noble, Nobel, an energy cycle that beneficially balances and joins. Right, you can spell it LE, it doesn't really matter. And look, I'm no expert. I'm doing my best to translate these words, right? I know it's there in this system, as you're probably seeing, many of you, and as you will soon see, all of these words, all of these concepts, they essentially all mean the same thing. And not mean the same thing, but they cannot exist without the other, and each is representative of the other. And so what we're going to find is that this language code translates Arabic, translates Maori, Aboriginal, Australian Aboriginal. It's going to translate Danish and Norse. It's going to do this because it is based on the core things that constitute life. Life cannot exist. Existence cannot exist without these 25 or 26, however you want to represent it, concepts. And each relates to the other in the same way that action is a symbol, action is a beginning, action is a balance, but it's also an imbalance. Right? Action joins, right? But action divides, quotients, right? And you can crisscross all of these concepts in that way, so that a word like atom, be it spelled ATOM or ATUM, is a unity that begins the cycle of life, or it's a unity that begins to carry life. And that means the same thing. You have a slight contextual twist, but the meaning is retained because cycle carries. Right? Cycle balances, but cycle imbalances. Cycle is a symbol. Cycle ends, begins. All of these concepts interrelate to each other and cannot exist without the other. All right, that has gone on way long enough, but wow, what a lot of awesome, cool information. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'm still having so much fun with this, and there's so much to decode. My goodness, we haven't left Genesis 1.1 yet, so stick around, guys. All right, hope you have fun. Love to all. Be good to each other out there, and yeah, we'll catch you all again very soon. See you guys. Bye.